Hi, my name is Renee DiLorenzo with OWTV. Today we're joining the Politics, Economics, and Law Club for a presentation by Robin Rue Simmons on how the next generation can lead on the road to reparations.
This is the state of affairs in America. 158 years after the Civil War and 55 years after the Civil Rights Movement, activists still line the streets in protest of the ongoing racism that oppresses Black Americans to this day. After a failed Reconstruction era shortly after the Civil War, the effort for reparations has yet to be implemented meaningfully. But in recent years, the effort has been gaining traction as many activists push legislators to address the failures of America in providing economic and social equality for Black Americans. This is Robin Rue Simmons, a former politician and now leader of the reparations movement. She gave a presentation at SUNY Old Westbury about what reparations mean and how they can be achieved. Simmons spoke with us about her experience, starting first with why she got involved.
So as a Black woman in a predominantly white and affluent community, obviously I didn't have the height of the lived experience as possible. But I do like to be careful and not suggest that I didn't have a beautiful upbringing, a neighborhood full of love, a village, a auntie on every corner, and access and safety. I felt heard and seen, and that I had access within my community. But as I matured and entered into the public school system, I saw where we were very much segregated. I saw where I didn't have the same opportunities as my white friends in the school. And it was there that it informed my advocacy efforts. It informed me even being a student in city council and my earliest career pursuits in advocating for Black home ownership and later for Black business and financial inclusion. But I did feel like I wanted justice. Although I had a great experience, I knew that I had it with less household income, less safety, less health, less access. And as I matured, I knew that I wanted justice for my family so that we could experience all that we were worthy of and that we had been stripped of simply because of racism.
Simmons explains that reparations are not just cash payments. Reparations can come in many forms, as a matter of fact. Reparations are about fixing the institutional and systemic issues that perpetuate the racial disparities in the country. These reparations can include housing policy, funding for schools and education, preventing labor discrimination, and civil rights that lift Black Americans up from statistical and preventable marginalization. Simmons explains what these reparations mean.
We're not looking at charity, which has really been responsible for sustaining our racial gaps, keeping Black communities oppressed and not having access. Charity has done that. Justice looks very much like friendship. It looks like tangible redress. It looks like reparations. And so it is important that we get more to a justice format of supporting and reimagining how we repair and empower, and not charity that has been responsible for the sustained racial gaps and oppression in Black community that we see today.
During her presentation, Simmons goes into depth about why cash payments are not enough. She explains that supporting policy is necessary to make the reparations effort successful.
A cash payment without policy reform, systems change around it, cooperation from other institutions. Like if we had a cash payment and we didn't address predatory lending and access to businesses and information and procurement and so on, if we didn't address steering brokers that are still happening today, discriminating real estate appraisal practices. I mean, there's such a long list of things that need to be addressed where a cash benefit without redressing some of those other harms is a stimulus in some ways. So I do agree with cash as a form of reparations, but if I had to choose one only, it would probably not be cash.
While the effort is absolutely gaining traction, there are a slew of hurdles in the way of a successful national reparations campaign. Acting as a whole, Congress is not likely to pass any kind of reparations legislation given the ideological divide between Republicans and Democrats. This is why local successes are key to the movement. Simmons' reparations bill, which was the first to be passed in the nation, was passed at the local level.
This nation is in a terrible place in terms of its politics. And so that's keeping the will and commitment, sort of the boldness from a House vote for H.R. 40. And so what's happening locally is very much being supported by Congress people that are in support of reparations nationally. They're seeing it as a tool towards a national effort. And when we really look at all of our national efforts, transformative legislation like school desegregation, marriage equality, ban the box, now even cannabis being a federal conversation, it usually starts with the local action. So now we're looking at this as the same, as a federal policy, the North Star, but as a responsibility at a local level to build on the case.
Of course, a huge effort like this to address racial issues in America attracts a lot of criticism. America is still deeply entrenched in the white supremacist values it was founded on, and many Americans still feel emboldened to maintain this dynamic. We saw a huge uptick in these sentiments since the 2016 election cycle, and it's still very much present in American society whether we like to admit it or not. Simmons explains the racially motivated hate she deals with as a result of her outspoken advocacy.
So the criticism I expected. So when I called the question to reparations, I knew that was going to come with attacks. What I expected was, and what I have received, was easy to deal with. White supremacists, ignorant insults and name calling, you dumb slave, you nigger, you just want a ghetto lottery, why don't you go to work, you lazy bum. Like, these are the types of insults I get in my inboxes, on social media, and so on.
But this isn't the only criticism she faces. In fact, the criticism that's hardest to deal with comes from the very people she represents.
What's a little harder is when Black residents feel as though it's not enough. And that's hard because I actually don't disagree that it alone is enough, that we have settled reparations, that the work is done. But it is hurtful at times to not be able to at least acknowledge the effort and work together to build on an expansion of what we have done. We are hurting. We are in a state of an emergency. We have been in a cycle of pandemic and epidemic and emergencies since we have been kidnapped from West Africa and been in this nation. So I have a lot more patience in how that is expressed within our own community, because I do have the same urgency. I am feeling the demand and not at all in disagreement. I do think that it's counterproductive, though, to have this sort of inter-community debate when we can work together more to expand the commitments that we've had.
Much of the nation is still in denial about the systemic racism that oppresses Black Americans. Others are simply ignorant as to the scope of impact these harmful institutions have had on the community as a whole. But the information is there, staring right at us, and it's our job to educate ourselves about it and understand the role we play in righting this wrong. Simmons explains further.
If you don't get it, if you don't see it because you're living in a segregated and affluent community and it's not outside your front door, look at the data, and look at the data that says your Black friends have $100,000 less income than you have. And imagine your life without that asset, that resource, that income, that cash. Just imagine the data. Imagine the education gaps that Black students are testing lower, having fewer successes academically. Just imagine that. Look at the data. The data will lead you to the story that you cannot see. Or you can step outside of your community. That is possible. There's no boundaries. You can step outside of your community and experience what that is like. You can be a part of an organization or a not-for-profit, or an exchange with an interfaith group, something along those lines. It is all possible, but we have to get to where we are caring, where we are prioritizing justice. We are not separating ourselves, and we are taking on each other's problems as they are our own. And that's what I did in my community. When white residents will say, what can I do about this crime, or what can I do about these injustices? Let's start with, what would you do? What would you do if it was your son who could not safely walk to take the trash out without being over policed in the alley or something along these lines? What would you do if your child did not have fair access to education? What would you do if your aging parents did not have access to health and couldn't age in place and had to go to deteriorating senior homes? What would you do? And so my challenge really to the community is just friendship. What would you do if it were your friend? And think about that. If it were your family, and think about what your responses will be, because we don't have all the answers. And in fact, Black folks should not have to have the burden of fixing every single problem. Fix the problem that we see before us. Reverse engineer from the data back to the problem and come up with a solution. We can do all things. We accomplish things. We print money when there is a pandemic. We give reparations in other scenarios. We can do the same for Black America.
Simmons wraps up her presentation with an optimistic call to action.
The movement needs your young thought. It needs your boldness, the audacity that you have, the way that you share information. We need you. We need your thought. Are we on the right track?
This has been Renee DeLorenzo with OWTV. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again.